How's it going, folks? It's your boy Chatifer, and in this video, I'm going to be going over Smite Season 10 Worlds group stages. I'm going to go over every set. I'm going to say what I think about every set. I'm going to rank every player on each team from best to worst based on how they played during this part of the Worlds tournament alone. And then I'm going to go over predictions on how I think the rest of Worlds is going to go at the end of the video. So let's get into it. Okay, so looking at set number 1, Gilded Gladiators versus Hex Mambo. Hex Mambo 2-0'd the Gladiators in this set. Not a huge surprise. I expected Hex Mambo to win, to be honest. I think Hex Mambo is simply an SPL caliber team. I think they could definitely be Eldritch Hounds. They can be Camelot Kings. They could be competitive even with teams like the Highland Ravens and the Atlantis Leviathans. So I don't really hate on the Gilded Gladiators too much this set. They didn't get stomped super hard either of the games. One of the games, they've been winning a decent portion of it. I'll go into individual player performances more when I get to that other portion of the video where I'm ranking the players. But for now, that's all I'm going to say about this set. Kind of went how I expected. Not hating on the Gladiators too hard at this point. So match number 2 was the Eldritch Hounds versus the Callan Wardens. And I think here at this portion of the tournament is where people started really, like, the stock for the SPL teams was slowly lowering. People were calling like SPL trash and things like that, which, here's the thing. We knew that the Eldritch Hounds, the Kings, the Ravens, and the Glads were the weakest of the SPL. My whole thing is that SCC has always had certain teams that are definitely SPL caliber. And I think this year the SCC teams just impressed me more than the SPL teams unimpressed me. And that's probably a hot take. I think most people are thinking that SPL should just be like way better than SCC, and this is more so SPL not living up to their names, more so than the SCC rising. But in my humble opinion, the SCC just did really well this tournament, especially the Callan Wardens. They were the most surprising with how good they were. I mean, they completely stomped the Eldritch Hounds both games. I think the Eldritch Hounds only had one player that was even looking really good during this set. So a big surprise, and I'm excited for the players on the Callan Wardens after this tournament to see where they go in the future. Set 3, Highland Ravens versus the Jabalba Storm. Ravens 2-0 them, of course. Ravens looked like the best team in this tourney, in my opinion, while Jabalba Storm looked like the worst. Jabalba Storm still didn't look terrible. However, you know, I feel like they're kind of outclassed by basically every team. I don't see them really winning a set on any other team in this tournament. The Ravens kind of stomped them both games. Zap and Hurry trolled a little bit. They're kind of getting carried throughout this tournament. But all that being said, I definitely think the Highland Ravens just truly, you know, 1-for-1 completely outclassed the Jabalba Storm in the set. Set 4 was the Solar Scarabs versus the Camelot Kings. They also 2-0'd the Camelot Kings. I'd say one game they kind of stomped them. The other game was decently close. And I just think the Solar Scarabs, again, they are an SPL caliber team. However, I really do think that a big reason why they were able to beat the Kings is just because they kind of countered the Kings. They're not a good matchup for the Kings. They are really good. They're a really good late game team, which is when the Kings want to excel. So as long as they can end up doing it a little bit better, they'll basically just beat the Kings every single time, which they ended up doing. And another big part of why I feel like they're not a good matchup for the Kings, and they kind of counter them, is that the Kings' typical worst two players, and, you know, at least for most of the game time that Kings have been playing, Variety and Twig have let them down the most whenever they do lose, I feel like. And with the Solar Scarabs, they play through Deathwalker and April. April and Deathwalker are their two best players. So Solo and Jungle is the two best players on the Scarabs, while for the Kings, that's their two worst players. And so I feel like that also kind of goes against the Kings' chances of winning against a team like the Solar Scarabs. But all in all, it was a fun set. And, you know, doesn't super surprise me. I think the Kings' ceiling is probably higher than the Solar Scarabs, but with how the Kings have been playing recently, it kind of makes sense to me that they could lose to the Scarabs. Moving on to set 5, it was the Gilded Gladiators versus the Jabalba Storm. Gladiators 2-0'd them like they really should. It'd be very bad for them if they couldn't do that. However, one thing that's also not a good sign for the Gladiators during the set is that it kind of felt like Kirmi just straight up won both games by himself. The other Glads didn't do terrible. This is the best they did the whole set, but it was definitely the Kirmi carry show. I think One of the games was like semi close ish. And then the other game, they completely and utterly stomped them. So it does show levels to this thing. However, again, it did worry me a little bit that it just seemed to be Kirmi completely carrying, and the other Glads still didn't step up too much during this set. And honestly, I think that's about all I have to say about this set. It was kind of whatever. The next set was the Eldritch Hounds versus the Kings. And then during this set, I don't really think either team stepped up. They kind of were just playing at the same level they had been, which is shitty. The Kings are just a little bit naturally better than the Hounds. They have a lot more veteranship, a lot more experience. I think Ducky actually still played pretty well, but the rest of the Hounds, they just weren't living up to expectations, and the Kings were able to take this set. It was a decently close set. I don't really think, like, all in all, I think this set was pretty close, and the Kings just were able to edge it out, basically. This next set was the Highland Ravens versus the Hex Mambo, and this is where the Ravens really differentiated themselves and showed that they're kind of on another level from most of these other teams here. There was 4 games, right? They did lose one. It was a 3-1 set. The time they lost was actually really close, but 2 of the times that they managed to defeat Hex Mambo, they blew them out of the water. So the Hex Mambos win, close. One Highland Ravens win was semi-close, and then the other 2 wins completely destroyed them. And the Hex Mambo were like probably the team that looked the second or at least the third best during this tournament. So that really showed just how high up the Ravens are. And yeah, I think they just straight up played better in this set than they did in the past sets too. I think the Highland Ravens actually did just start playing better in the set as well. Match 8 was the Eldritch Hounds versus the Solar Scarabs. And this is where I really started to get under the mindset that SEC teams were just impressive, more so than the SPL teams were non-impressive, because the Kaladin Wardens were like destroying the Solar Scarabs every early game. The set wasn't like, it's not like the Scarabs destroyed the Wardens. This was a close set pretty much every game. I don't think the fact that the Solar Scarabs won 3-1 does the set justice. It feels more like a 3-2 set. And this really shows me that whenever the Wardens beat the Hounds 2-0, it wasn't that the Hounds weren't playing up to their best. It was more so that the Wardens are actually just that good. So I came out of the set, even though Scarabs won, I just expected the Scarabs to win. So this set actually really surprised me with how good the Wardens were. It sucks that they didn't qualify. And yeah, let's just move on to the next set. Match 9, we had Hex Mambo versus the Goated Gladiators, and the Goated Gladiators just totally disappointed. I think they actually just straight up actively played the worst during this set, more so than the Hex Mambo are just that much better than them. I think on a really good day, the Goated Gladiators could actually have a decently close set against a team like Hex Mambo, but not today. They just all played pretty bad. And yeah, I mean, honestly, what else can I say? Hex Mambo just whooped the Gladiators' ass. That's a terrible way for them to end their season, not gonna lie. Kind of embarrassing. The final set was the Kaladin Wardens versus the Camelot Kings. I think this was another 3-1. The Wardens beat them the first game, then the Kings just swept them after that. I believe the games that the Kings won, they kind of kicked their asses. Like, it wasn't even a super close set. And I truly believe that the Kings just played by far the best they played the whole tournament during the set. They kind of got their shit together. I think it was Deathwalker in an interview said that he thinks the Kaladin Wardens are actually going to win. And I think he would have been right based on how the Kings had played up until then. But he had no way of knowing that the Kings were going to come out swinging near this set. So hopefully this trend continues and they give us some good games at Worlds as well. Let's move on to ranking each player. We'll start off ranking Jabalba Storm, which Jabalba Storm, unfortunately, they kind of just got outclassed during most of this tournament. However, let's see how each individual player did. I definitely think their worst player was Globe. In a lot of these fights, you could see Globe was just getting dove. It was obvious that the enemy team was just trying to pick on him, make sure that the mid laner didn't get to do much. So Globe did get farmed a lot. I mean, he picked picks like Zeus, which didn't work out at all. It just made him really easy to dive for warriors, people like Hodix. And, just solos and supports were just constantly diving Globe, and he was dying basically every time. I think Globe actually kind of by far did the worst on his team, to be honest with you. The next 2 are pretty close. I think it's between Tegvir and Shinigami. Unfortunately for Tegvir, this meta seems to be pretty solo dominated, and for someone with like little experience like him up against some goats like Hodix, just people with a lot more experience, he kind of got out impacted, outvalued, outperformed in pretty much every game. But that being said, he was still a solo laner. He was still playing decently. So I think he performed decently. And I think the other person that you can kind of compare him to on his own team was Shinigami. I think Shinigami basically performed decently the whole tournament. He wasn't getting destroyed by Zap. I don't think he was destroying other people either. He was doing, basically just enough he could for his team. So Teg and Shinigami for their team, I think they're the next two up. I'd probably put Shinigami as the second worst, then Teg in the top three, but it's super close. You could go either way. Next up, you have the two players that I think were keeping them in the game the most. Number two, I'm going to give to Rat Milk because there's definitely a lot of other junglers that were kind of just babying Rat Milk at certain points, but Rat Milk made some really good plays. He had some good Thor dunks. He had some high impact. He was getting, a decent amount of kills every game, I think, or most games. So I can't really hate on Rat Milk's performance. He did pretty good. And then the person that I think low-key performed the best on Javala Storm is actually their support, Happen. If you watched Happen, he was making shit happen. He was playing support very well. I think he got his team out of some sticky situations. I think he set up for his team very well. He fed some of his teammates kills. I think Happen just played really well throughout the tournament. And so, yeah, that's Xibalba Storm there, boys. That's Xibalba Storm. Hopefully those weren't too hot of takes, but I doubt any of y'all really give that many fucks. Let's move on to the next team. Next up, we'll go over the team that looked the best this tournament, the Highland Ravens. I think it's pretty fucking obvious that Zap looked the worst. Zap was actually getting kind of ADC diffed, ADC gapped, like by multiple people throughout this tournament. I think he got soloed at least twice. He had the most mistakes on his team by far, so he's just automatically down there. His damage numbers weren't really comparing to Vin's damage numbers, and definitely not Haddix's either, so Zap, pretty obviously lowest impact. Next up, I'm actually putting Hurry, but I do think Hurry is pretty close to being above the person above him. However, Hurry still comes in at fourth. Hurry just made the second most mistakes on his team, which was a lot because, Zap made a lot, so Hurry definitely also made a lot, being his dual lane partner. They're getting gapped sometimes in the dual lane, definitely getting carried some games, but Hurry, unlike Zap, I think made a decent amount of great support plays as well, and actually was pretty vital in certain points of, some of their sets to their win. So Hurry's definitely pretty far above Zap, actually, in my opinion. And then I think Hurry's actually close to Scream. Scream's who I'm putting in third. Scream, he didn't carry some of the other junglers. Some of the other junglers were super hard carrying games. People like Kirmi, April, Slash, they were obviously super important and integral to their team. Whereas Scream, I think, just did his job decently enough. I don't think he was a huge carry. So that's why Scream comes in at third. He did also have a couple of games that were kind of iffy. But then you have Vin Haddix, and Vin Haddix hard carry Ravens during this Worlds. Vin and Haddix just played insane. I think Haddix definitely best solo this tournament. Vin is probably top two mid. There's one other mid that I think might have played slightly better than them, but I can't hate on Haddix or Vin's performances. They played crazy. I think Haddix was super obvious that he was playing crazy and that he's number one for the Highland Ravens. But if you have questions about why I'm putting Vin 2, go back and watch it, but focus more on Vin. Vin was crazy good this tournament as well. Next team, bang. Let's go over the Solar Scarabs next. I think last place, semi-obvious, not as obvious as Zap, but Zeros. And that's just kind of Zero's play style. I don't think Zero's actively played bad. I think he got gapped by a lot of mids. I think he actually looked like one of the worser mids during this tournament. But, mids were really good this tournament. So that's not too bad. And it's kind of just his play style. He's not really a carrying mid. He kind of wants to just help facilitate his team, do as much damage as he can. But, Zero's got soloed once or twice this tournament. He was having a decent amount of deaths compared to other mids, I feel like. And just in terms of his carrying, he didn't really carry that much, to be honest. He wasn't a playmaker, but that's just typical Zeros, right? Moving on, I think that you actually have people that are really close to each other. This might be one of the two closest. It was hard to decide between E-Chrome and iSilenced. I think iSilenced had some really good support games, and then he had some iffier support games, but he also made some really good plays. I think he paired super well with April. Him and April played really good off of each other. And him and E-Chrome, too. E-Chrome, in terms of damage numbers, he was pumping out, some of the most damage during this tournament. I think he was a top 3 damage dealer this tournament. So in terms of damage, E-Chrome did a shit ton. But in terms of, seeable impact, he only made a few, super good plays. Besides that, I think he was just doing the normal ADC thing. And he actually got farmed in, 1 or 2 games. I think he went 1-7 one game. And so that's why I've actually put Egrom as the second worst and Eye Silence slightly above him. But they are really close. I think everyone on this team actually played very well except Zeros. He was just, decent. Top two, Deathwalker at number 2 might be slightly surprising. Deathwalker looked like him and Haddix were the only two people. Like, they were on a new level or another level from all the other solos, in my opinion. It was Haddix and it was Deathwalker. Haddix probably looked a little bit more better than Deathwalker. Deathwalker's playstyle was less carry, I feel like, but his Osiris build was sick. I think Deathwalker was a really big impact on his team. He had some high damage numbers some games. He died only a few times, and he was getting those kills. He was zoning very well. He was living forever. Deathwalker was doing the solo thing. However, April, super impactful games. He looked like, let's see, best jungler. Was April the best jungler? Whenever I think of top junglers during this tournament, I'm thinking of April. Like, off the top of my head, I'm thinking of April, Johnny, and Slash. How would I rank those three? I honestly might even put April number 1 out of those three. I think April looked sick. He was a huge reason why that they were even having any impact in the early game, because this is a not very good early game team. But I think April was making some plays early game, but April was making plays the whole time too. He was just the most well-rounded player on their team, I think. His Mercury is super clean. His Mercury is sick. I want to see world stage April Mercury. Please, God. Next team. Next up, I'll be ranking the players on the Camelot Kings. And as a whole throughout this tournament, I feel like a lot of them played pretty fucking bad. But that final set against the Wardens, they all played fucking sick. Like, that's close-ish to the Kings we used to know. So ranking them, I obviously have to put Twig last, even though I think Twig made a couple of decent good plays. I think in the late game, Twig was very integral, but Twig got fucking soloed multiple times. He had some of the highest deaths out of everybody. I think he's top 3 for deaths in the whole tournament. He made the most mistakes on the team by far. So even though I think he had more carrying, more impact, more like big plays than some of the other people on his team, he was definitely like the biggest reason for their losses, I would say. Next up, the two next people are very close to each other, and that's Quig and Yarkor. Quig, I think, just made more mistakes than Yarkor, so Quig is going to come in 4th place because he made more mistakes than Yarkor. I look at him as kind of how I looked at Hurry. They're both making mistakes. They're both inting a little bit, but they're also making really good setup plays and having some really good peel moments that kind of keep them from those bottom spots. Yarkor's in 3rd. The thing with Yarkor is Yarkor just played super consistently this game. Like, he just played completely how you would expect. I don't recall Yarkor ever making a big play this tournament, but I don't recall him ever making his team lose the game. He was kind of just doing his thing. I mean, pretty much the epitome of average. Like, whenever the Kings got shit on, he would get shit on too. Did he get shit on the worst? No, but did he do the best on his team when they were getting shit on? No. When the Kings were winning, was Yarkor like the top player and the top reason why they won? No. Was he the top reason, or was he like the worst on their team when they were winning? No, he was just in the middle the whole time. He was like the epitome of average during this tournament. And I think something's going to come as a huge surprise. It's going to be the spiciest take. I am putting Variety as number 2. So Variety in the early game, he got soloed a couple times. He just fed. Variety entered early games a couple times this tournament. But when the Kings looked good, I think a huge reason was because of Variety. I mean, go back. Variety had really good stats. He was some of the highest damage on his team. Multiple games. He was getting the most kills on his team. He was getting the most assists. I think late game Variety was still one of the better solos. Not top 2, maybe not even top 3, but Variety was still one of the better solos this game. If you take away the early game and maybe the mid game, but late game Variety's zoning and just his target priority was still really good. Variety was actually a huge impact as to why the Kings won, in my opinion. But the real reason why the Kings were able to qualify and the reason why their team doesn't completely suck ass is their carry, Big Man Tings. I think Big Man Tings basically has been hard carrying this team. I guess back when Genetics was on the team, it was him and Genetics, but Big Man Tings was never not hard carrying this team. Big Man Tings is one of the best mid laners. I think he might even be better than Paul. I'm a Big Man Tings fan and a stan. Watch this tournament. Focus on Big Man Tings. He hard carries. He looked like one of the best. Like, it was Big Man Tings, Vin, and a third person. They looked crazy good. They're super good. They're some of the best mids in the world for sure. But, in this tournament specifically, Big Man Tings, he always was doing the best on the Kings. I think Big Man Tings did the best every single game. There wasn't a single game where somebody out-impacted Big Man Tings on his team. Let's move on to the next team. Oh, the Gladiators. I think the bottom 3 people in the Gladiators, they all sucked during this tournament. I think the person in second was like decent, and the person in first was like decent. I don't think any of these people played good this tournament. Really, But let's get into this. For last place, I have Kana. Now, it's kind of close between Kana and the person above him, but the thing is, Kana just by far looked like the worst solo. I think he looked worse than like Tegveer on Storm. Like, Kana literally looked like the worst in his role in this tournament. So I have to put him last. He had a game where he went like 0-7-0. 0 kills, 7 deaths, 0 assists. That is probably the worst performance, worst individual performance in the whole tournament. Goes to Kana. And in terms of impact, the only time he had impact was games where, I mean, basically the games where they won. Probably during when they fought Shivalba Storm. That was the only time he had really any impact at all. I think he basically kind of just sat around and did nothing the whole tournament. Same can almost be said for Snoopy, though. However, Snoopy didn't have as bad of performances as Kana. Maybe didn't make as many mistakes. Still made a fuckload, though. He did have one really good play with the Chernobog Gold, at least. More than we can say for Kana, but I do think Snoopy and Kana are actually kind of close to each other. Snoopy probably looked like the worst ADC during this tournament as well. He definitely did. I think they both looked the worst in the whole tournament in their roles. Next up is Jake. Did Jake look like the worst support? Jake might have also looked like the worst support. It's definitely closer with Jake. He kept playing Charon. I just don't think he was having a lot of impact on Charon. He was doing a lot of damage. I mean, Jake out-damaged like fucking Snoopy, Kana, and maybe even Jang like multiple times. Like his damage numbers on Charon were good, but actual impact, support capabilities, and peeling, it kind of wasn't helping his team too much. He did make a few plays. He had a few good waves. He was probably getting even more kills than a lot of his teammates were, but I think Jake just played super selfishly this tournament. I don't know if he even really cared about winning based on the way he played. He just wasn't really playing support. He was kind of playing ranked. I'm going to try to carry as a character that's not supposed to carry type of gameplay. Yeah, just very low impact for Jake. Top two players I do think played decently well considering they had 3 trash cans on their team, and that's Jang. Jang, I think, was just like the epitome of decency. He made a few good plays. He got shit on a few times, but overall, he would kind of just average the whole time. And then Kirmi, same, except during Shivalba Storm, they completely won that set because of Kirmi. Kirmi was definitely having the highest impact basically every single game. I don't think Kirmi got out-impacted by anyone on his team on any game. He completely won Shivalba Storm for them. He looked insane on my man, Bridget. My man, Bridget plus Kirmi is a great combo. Let's move on to the next team. Next up, we'll go over Hex Mambo. For 5th place on Hex Mambo, I'm going to go with Julio. I think Julio didn't look like one of the better solos this tournament. He definitely looked like one of the worser solos this tournament. I don't think he actually actively played super bad. Haddix did call him a brute minion in lane. I think that was Julio's biggest problem, is that in lane he was giving up too much. He didn't really care about winning lane to the point that actually detrimented his team's early game a decent amount. But late game, I think he mostly played average. He did have a few really good plays, especially on tier. Julio's tier is pretty clean, so all in all, Julio didn't play bad. It's just, you know, it's Hex Mambo. They all played pretty well this tournament, so he's in 5th. Next up, I'll go with Spudio. And Spudio did, you know, he looked better than Zap maybe, but Spudio didn't super impress me. He was probably like a mid-range ADC, mid-tier ADC this tournament, in my opinion. He kind of just did what he needed to do. I do think late game, he was, at least some of the games, he did look like a super great late game player. Like, he was having really high damage number games. He was shredding tanks late game. I think he's definitely a good late game player. It's just like, all in all, he kind of comes out to just being decent. I don't really have much to say about Spudio. Move on to the next player. These next two are super close, and this is where I think the better players on Hex Mambo are. Like, these players played really good this tournament. Again, barely in 3rd place, almost 2nd. We're going to go with Kha'Zix. Kha'Zix definitely looked like one of the better supports this game. Kha'Zix Sobek, he might be the best Sobek player in the world after what I just saw. His Sobek was super good. He had super good peel, making super good plays. He felt really unkillable on Sobek, and I just think he had really high impact on his team. I mean, point blank, period, right? And the person that I have barely above Kha'Zix is Rapio. Rapio actually did kind of look like one of the better of the mids this tournament. I think Rapio might have looked like the 4th best mid this tournament. I mean, mid was stacked this tournament. Mid played so well this tournament, so 4th is still really good. He had some really good plays, and I think his damage numbers were just super high compared to some of the other mids. Like, I mean, he hits his abilities. He doesn't get farmed. He makes plays here and there. What more can you ask for from your mid laner? I talk too fast. I don't breathe enough. I suck at YouTube. Please still listen to my commentary. Please still care what I have to say. Let's move on to the Number 1 player on Hex Mambo, which shouldn't come as a surprise. It's Johnny. I mean, Johnny probably just out impacted everybody on his team every single game. Looked like one of the better junglers this tournament. He's a hyper carry. It's Johnny. What more can you ask for, honestly? Next team. Right, next up we have the Hounds. To be honest, the Hounds only looked better than like Jababa Storm and Glads, and that's barely. So I don't really think any of the Hounds besides one player even played good in the first place. In last place I have Stu, and that's because Stu just kind of did the Stu thing, except even worse than usual. He does that thing where he tries not to lose the game, but he never tries to win. Like, he'll never be the reason you lost, but he'll never be the reason you won. He made 0 plays throughout the tournament. He didn't really diff anyone at any point. He kind of just played safe the whole time. And if his team got shit on, he got shit on just equally as hard. And if his team was doing good, it definitely wasn't because of him, right? That's the Stu thing. Kind of an overrated player. Next up, these two are super close. I put Neil next, and then I put Benny third. I think you could swap around Neil and Benny. Neil, he just looked like one of the worst of supports during this tournament, but he didn't really make too many big mistakes, and he actually did make some good plays. Neil on Yamoja looked pretty fucking decent. Neil on Kuzmo is one of the better Kuzmos. Looked pretty decent. It's just, Neil, he's not really a super flashy support player, so I didn't really notice him doing anything super good to make his team win. So I have to put Neil fourth. Putting Benny a little bit above him. Benny definitely looked like one of the worser mids this tournament, but he didn't play terrible. He had some decent impact. When they were winning, it was decently because of Benny. Pretty much played average all in all, so Benny comes in at third. Number 2 is Oath. Now, Oath did not look like one of the better junglers. Oath was getting jungle diffed. However, jungle was stacked this fucking tournament. I think jungle, solo, and mid were just stacker root skied. And the thing with Oath, and why I'm putting Oath second, is because I think Oath was a huge reason when they were like winning and finding success. Obviously, the person above him more so, but Oath I definitely think was the second most impactful and the second biggest reason when they had success. Oath was getting the kills and the ganks that he needed to get, and he had some really sick plays here and there. But far and away, Ducky played the best on the Hounds. Ducky actually looked like a really good solo laner. I want to see Ducky on a better team. Like, put Ducky on Solar Scarabs, Hex Mambo, Highland Ravens, and I wonder if he still performed as good as he did, because low-key, Ducky might have been like crazy good this tournament and was just being let down by his teammates, in all honesty. Feels bad for Ducky. Moving on. Okay, last team, Callan Wardens. 5th place, Delny. I think Delny looked like one of the worst solo laners this tourney. I think he basically got diffed by at least a little bit every single game. He made maybe one good play the whole tournament. Besides that, he was kind of just not feeding to absolutely cost his team. But whenever the Wardens were doing super good, it definitely wasn't because of Delny 90% of the time. I think if they had a better solo laner, they might have actually qualified, to be honest with you. Moving on to number 4. Sorry about that, guys. I'm pretty cringy sometimes. 4 is Tuba. Tuba just looked like a mid-tier, maybe even a bottom-tier ADC, but he completely held his own, I mean, Tuba was there. He wasn't making you lose, but he wasn't making you win. He was just one of those average players. Kind of feel about Tuba how I feel about Stu, basically. Moving on to number 3. Elion. Now, Elion, 3 and 2 are close. I almost had Elion number 2, but I'm going to put Elion number 3. He made some of the most plays as a support. That's the thing, is that when Elion looked good, he looked really good. His Athena was crazy, which is OP. I think he had one of the better Sylvanas. He probably had the best Maui. Like, when Elion looked good, he looked great. His comms are super important for his team. I know Elion was a super big impact as to when the Callan Wardens were winning and stuff like that. But in terms of like how much he actually carried, I have to put him third, because I do think the top 2 players carried harder than him. Moving on, so Slash definitely was probably the second best jungler this tournament. Slash looked crazy good. He even soloed April at one point. He was getting triple kills. His Thanatos looked clean as fuck. He was kind of hyper carrying. So, just based on the way Slash played, I really can't put him lower than 2. Honestly, Slash he was hard carrying. There was one game where he like straight up won the game by himself. Like, there was one Warden's win completely because of Slash. Have to put him at number 2. And then Nog. Nog might have been the best mid laner. I mean, I think it's like Nog, Venenu, and Big Man Tings looked on a crazy note. Like, Nog completely looked like he can hang with SPL. Nog needs to be a mid laner in the SPL next season. Nog was insanely good. Nog was far and away the biggest reason why this team surprised everybody. I think people expected them to be decent because of players like Elion, basically. And like what? Who else? Maybe just Elion, you know? Maybe people who knew more of their shit was probably like, oh, they've got Elion and Slash as well, so that team's going to be decent. No way they're going to be crazy until you look at Nog. If you know how good Nog is, this team gets so much better. Nog is crazy good. He made so many. He probably has the top plays for mid laners, though. Like, even though I think Big Man and Venenu might have been just as consistent, I think Nog had, like, the most, like, big plays this tournament. He's insane at Cuckoo. He hit, like, every single Cuckoo ult. I mean, Nog is crazy good. And that's the ranking. Okay, let's end this off with some predictions. Here's the bracket for the finals. The first match is going to be Styx Ferryman versus the Solar Scarabs. I'm hoping that the Solar Scarabs stay competitive, and that's about all I can hope for. I doubt the Solar Scarabs really have a chance. I think they could take one game. That's the best I'm giving Scarabs is one game. But yeah, I'm like 99% sure that's a Styx Ferryman win. Jade Dragons versus Highland Ravens. This one should be close, but especially because the Highland Ravens just played, they're kind of hot, and just dude, the Highland Ravens look so good. I think I'm gonna give like a 10% higher chance for the Highland Ravens to come out on top with the Jade Dragons. I just have a Highland Ravens feeling in my gut, so I'm gonna go with Highland Ravens on that. Match 3, Leviathans versus Mambo. Don't really see Mambo winning again. I can see them winning maybe one game. I might have more hope for Mambo in this matchup than I do Scarabs, but it's like, okay, a 90% chance Leviathans come out on top here instead of a 99, right? Match 4, Oni Warriors versus the Camelot Kings. I'm hoping this one is semi-competitive. I highly doubt Kings are winning. I can see them taking one game, but there's a super high chance. I'll go 85% chance Oni Warriors win this game. You know, like I can see the Kings getting absolutely stomped here. And so that would obviously leave me with Ravens versus Ferryman. I actually think there's an 85% chance Ferryman win, and there's a 15% chance the Ravens win. That's my little doohickler decision making there. And then what I'd end up with, Oni Warriors versus Leviathans. This one should be super close as well, I think. I could see either team winning this. I think it's probably slightly more likely that the Leviathans win, but it's only by like 5 or 10% that I think the Leviathans are more likely to win. I can see Warriors winning too. But based off of what I said, that would end me what with Styx versus Leviathans as the most likely prediction. The most likely thing to happen would be Styx Ferryman versus Leviathans. And in the finals, I know the Ferrymen are the real favorites here, but my gut feeling is telling me to go with Leviathans. So if we do get a Ferryman versus Leviathans final, I think Leviathans are taking it. It's going to be super close, but I think Leviathans win. At least I hope it'll be a close set. We need a close finals game. But yeah, I'm going to go with Leviathans over Ferryman. Based off of, I'll just go over something else. The other possible thing I can see happening in the finals is a Ravens versus Oni Warriors finals. And if that happens, I think Oni Warriors have like an 85% chance of winning. And then, of course, the Oni Warriors could have also beaten Leviathans and met Ferryman in the finals. And in that case, I also feel Oni Warriors winning over Ferryman. So I don't see the Ferryman winning no matter what. It's just a feeling in my gut. I know it makes the most sense if they win. So the two most likely candidates for winning would be number 1, Leviathans, number 2, Oni Warriors. And then I'll even say number 3 is the Highland Ravens, and then Ferryman are the 4th most likely. And I don't see any other team winning. I think there's the only 4 people with a chance. If you got to this point in the video, I highly appreciate you guys. Please comment below if you got to the end of this video. I'll love you for the rest of my life. Peace out, guys. See you later.